you, distinguished colleagues and friends. I'm sorry I can't speak to you in your beautiful language. I'm having to use English, so I hope some of you maybe can get the translator's services. It's a big opportunity to be able to speak at this major event, particularly with the creation of the lead agency in the last 2 years. I've been asked to really focus on the importance of the lead agency for road safety. I speak from some professional experience in this subject because prior to joining the World Bank, I helped establish and bring to steer to success a lead agency in my own country, New Zealand. And I've come to believe more and more with my work in the World Bank, as I've had experience in lower middle income countries, that this issue of the lead agency is really the crucial issue. And I think it's a critical issue for the region, here Latin America and the Caribbean, particularly when we look, as has been mentioned this morning, looking at regional road safety performance. In 2003, we did some work in the World Bank. Elizabeth Coppitz and Maureen Cropper did some modelling work looking at the relationship between economic growth, traffic growth, and road crashes and road deaths and injuries, and the experience of the high-income countries from the start of motorisation through to 2003, and made some projections. And it highlighted a crisis on the roads of the Latin American and Caribbean region. Between 2000 and 2020, without substantial initiatives being taken, road deaths were projected to grow by nearly 50% in this region, whereas in high-income countries, they were projected to decrease by nearly 30%. And alarmingly, and has been mentioned a few times this morning and this afternoon, the road deaths per capita in the Latin American and Caribbean region were projected to increase from 26 per 100,000 people, which was a high rate anyway, to 31 per 100,000, which were the highest, and I emphasise, the highest reported regional rates in the world. And to put these data into perspective, at the time of the projections, 2 of the world's best performing countries, Sweden and the Netherlands, were already down to 5 deaths per 100,000 people, and they'd set themselves the long-term goal of eliminating road deaths and injuries. So therefore the projected 2020 rate for the region is 6 times what the world's best performing countries have already surpassed. As we head into the Decade of Action for Road Safety, which will get launched in May next year, it's timely to recall the recommendations of the World Report on Road Traffic Injury Prevention, which was published by the World Health Organization and the World Bank 6 years ago in 2004. These recommendations I've listed here, you can see them on the screen. But the first recommendation was to identify a lead agency in government to guide the national road safety effort. Second recommendation was assess the problems, the policies and institutional settings related to road traffic injury, and also assess the capacity for road traffic injury prevention in each country. The third was prepare a national road safety strategy and a plan of action. The fourth was to allocate financial and technical and human resources to address the problem. The fifth was to begin implementation of actions to prevent crashes and minimise injuries and their consequences, and evaluate the impact of these actions. And the fifth recommendation, or the sixth rather, concerned the support and development of national capacity and international cooperation. So these 6 recommendations must be treated as a whole and implemented as a totality, and the first recommendation concerning the establishment of a lead agency is paramount. Since the publication of that World Report, the World Bank's developed and trialled and published country guidelines to support the implementation of the World Report recommendations. The guidelines focus on the role of the lead agency in ensuring effective and efficient functioning of the road safety management system in the country, and they include practical procedures to accelerate knowledge transfer and scale up country investment to improve road safety results. These guidelines set out detailed steps for the conduct of country road safety management capacity reviews and the specification of lead agency reforms, investment strategies, and safe system projects designed to overcome the revealed safety management capacity weaknesses that are evident in the country after the review's been done. And their successful application is contingent on a country's willingness to support and promote their use with sustained, targeted investment that produces substantial and measurable results. In terms of the importance of the lead agencies, as has already been expressed by our first speaker this morning, that there's always a potential for road safety goals to be submerged by competing interests, and strong leadership's required to transform multi-sectoral shared responsibility for road safety into concerted results-based action, and hence the importance of the lead agency. I'll elaborate a little more on that in this presentation. In good practice countries, the lead agency's formally established, with its role usually being defined in legislation and in government policy documents and in annual performance agreements. And in considering the lead agency role, it goes right to the heart of the road safety management system, which can be viewed at three interconnected levels. The institutional management functions which produce interventions, which in turn produce results. We have a pyramid here that we use to explain all the elements of the system, and at the bottom of the pyramid, it's here in English, but it talks about the institutional management functions, which start with really the focus on results. What do you want to achieve in a country? That becomes a key factor. Usually this great desire to overcome the problems that are increasingly becoming evident in the country as motorisation starts to accelerate. And you have to look at how you coordinate for that, how you legislate for that, how you fund and allocate resources for those to achieve those results, how you promote that, how you monitor and evaluate it. Two of these things that were getting mentioned here in terms of the promotion. How do you create this common discourse that was mentioned across the nation? How do you generate the data, which is going to be the bedrock of a lead agency? It's what you build a lead agency on, the monitoring and evaluation function, or the observatory as it's being called from using a European concept. And also how you undertake research and development and knowledge transfer as it relates to the results you want to achieve. All that bottom of the pyramid is actually what produces the interventions, which in turn produce the results that you see at the top of the pyramid. And it's worth reflecting on this. This is a system, it's complex. When you look at interventions, it relates to looking at a road network. How do you plan it? How do you design it? How do you operate it? How do you use it? How do you make decisions about who can enter that network in terms of drivers and vehicles? How you exit them from that network if their behaviour is inappropriate or the vehicle's not to the right standard? And I would include in there licensed and commercial operators. How do you manage that? And how do you recover victims from that network? And how do you rehabilitate them in the long term? They're all the elements of interventions, and those in turn are defined either as standards and rules, which are set for the roads or the vehicles or the people or the operators or the emergency medical services, and then compliance regimes that you have to have in place to assure that those standards and rules are met. And in turn, they produce results, which ultimately at the top of this pyramid we see as really the social cost to the nation. That's really in the end what you're trying to reduce, the pain and suffering, the property damage, the loss of productivity that results from this level of trauma on the roads, and ways of looking at that in terms of final outcomes, the actual count of deaths, the actual count of injuries, through to intermediate outcomes. What are the speeds on the roads? What's the level of alcohol influenced drivers on the roads? Helmet wearing, belt wearing, the quality of the roads themselves, the quality of the vehicles through the star ratings from crash testing, and or even in terms of the actual outputs, in terms of right down at the bottom of the pyramid, what's actually being produced day by day to achieve these results. So this system is very complex. In terms of looking at the lead agency responsibility there, in principle, the lead agency addresses all those elements of the road safety management system. In the case of interventions, it's usually responsible for the setting of safety standards and rules for the planning, design, operation and use of the road network, also for the entry and exit of vehicles and drivers from that network. Often it's less involved in the post-crash side with the health sector, but in principle it still could be interested in what sort of performance it's looking for from the health sector in that regard. And it also is responsible often for the related compliance regimes, and this which requires partnerships with the road controlling authorities and the police in particular, and the emergency medical services. But more significantly, and this is the bit that's not really visible, it's a lot less visible, the lead agency usually takes responsibility for all the institutional management functions, which were presented at the bottom of this pyramid here. That at the bottom of that pyramid, the lead agency is across all those functions. Though sometimes it might take more of a guiding or a catalytic or encouraging role there. But with what's been returned the results focus, which is the primary overarching function, the lead agency usually plays the crucial role, as this function addresses the issues of leadership, strategy and ownership. Where are you trying to go with the system? What do you want to achieve? How are you going to get there? Who's responsible? Who's accountable? Those issues are very much in the domain of the lead agency. And those other 6 functions contribute to the achievement of the desired results. So how are you going to coordinate for it? How are you going to legislate for it? How are you going to fund it? How are you going to promote it? How are you going to monitor it, evaluate it? How are you going to invest in more research and development to improve the performance of that system? And so I have 2 slides here where we look at those institutional management functions and look at the dimensions of the lead agency role there. And I won't discuss those in detail here. That's sort of more a technical issue, but I put this up really just to illustrate that it's complex, and yet that's the reality. If you want to achieve good safety performance in your country, these are the dimensions that need to be managed. And when you think about it, who's going to take that? Who's going to take that responsibility? This is actually, you have to dedicate an agency to that role, to cover all those dimensions, to ensure that that is all being managed is very much the work of a lead agency. And that's a lot of work. That's not an add-on, that's not a department in room 33 down the corridor in a roading agency. That's an entity in itself. And in the absence of that being managed, not much is probably going to be delivered. If we look at Argentina as a case study, and Argentina is our conference host here, and the presentation that Felipe made presented this recently created agency, the ANSV. And it's really an exemplary sort of case study of the committed implementation of the World Report recommendations. If you go back to those recommendations, you can tick them all off here. They've been implemented. And it's also a good practical application of the World Bank guidelines that we developed to support such a process. And this new agency, through a project that we're doing with the World Bank, with the agency, is strengthening its management capacity, particularly in terms of the vertical coordination down to the municipal level, in terms of creating a federal leadership role in a federal country. It's doing that. It's piloting multi-sectoral interventions in high-risk corridors. It's building comprehensive monitoring and evaluation systems within its new National Road Safety Observatory, and it's partnering internationally with the International Road Traffic Accident Database Group. Veronique will make a presentation in this conference about that partnership. It's been partnering with the International Road Assessment Program, IRAP, and it's been partnering with the international road policing organisation RoadPol, which is a new group that we're creating through the World Bank Global Road Safety Facility to bring about peer-to-peer relationships between countries and sort of in a global context. So you can see all those 6 recommendations are actually being acted out here in the last few years, and already we're getting a sense of improvements in safety occurring. But you get investments and institutional programs of this type. They're very complex. And to implement all those recommendations, that key recommendation is vital, because really you couldn't do it without an empowered lead agency to own and manage those functions. It's my view. I'd like to finish with just a few key messages about the role of the lead agency and the importance of it. The first message is that without, as I've been repeating really, without authoritative and accountable lead agency support, combined with sustainable funding and technical resources, efforts to coordinate and promote improved road safety results are likely to be ineffective. The last 30 years of initiatives that the World Bank's been involved in lower middle income countries highlight the failure of the small scale measures that lacked strong lead agency leadership.